Okay, we're gonna get our second panel started here, right, we have Dennis Russell from Madison Communications and we have Hunter from Charter. This was their idea, but the earlier panel, right, they wanted to be called the cable fossils, I think, and so. Yeah.
Cable dogs.
Or that was Tom, cable dogs, I'm sorry. All right. So these guys, I think, wanted to be called the young guns or something like
There's
that.
nothing young about what's sitting up here.
So, right, a few industry people that, basically had started, back as pretty much installers and have progressed their career beyond. So with that, Dennis, if you wouldn't mind going first, just provide kind of a little synopsis of your career, please.
Sure. Yeah, I started with Madison in 2002. I think there's a couple of underlying themes in this whole presentation with Dick and Tom and what you'll hear from myself and Hunter. A couple things that sound the same and a lot of things that sound different. So to me, that lends itself to the fact that you don't have to fit any type of mold to succeed in this industry. But one thing about that is some of these guys sitting up here have formal education, college degrees, and some of us don't. I fall into the latter camp. College really wasn't my thing, so I decided to go into the workforce. And when I joined Madison in 2002 as a cable TV installer, I just had a friend who worked at Madison. I think that's one of the things you hear a lot as well. People that get into this industry because of someone they know or someone that is already in the industry that says, hey, this is a good thing. Why don't you come check it out? That's what happened for me. I really honestly didn't even know what Madison did when I applied and go shortly through the interview process. Like I said back then, installing cable TV, the company was kind of split down the middle, phone techs and cable techs. And if you know anything about our industry, they don't get along too well. A lot of days we never spoke, but we've evolved into the same person. The technology, they're so similar. We're really not different people. And worked my way up from there. It took me a little bit longer, I guess, than most to realize that this wasn't just a job anymore. It could be a career. And for me, it was being involved in the SCTE and going to the cable games. That's where it first started for me, where I realized that there could be more to this than just me installing cable every day, because it's easy as an installer to, get busy in your daily stuff, and that's all you know, and that's all you see. There's a whole other world out there to this industry, and SCTE opened my eyes to that for sure. So I believe I was with Madison for 5-6 years before we started competing in the cable games, coming over to the local vendor day here in St. Louis, and several years after that before I ever won a medal in any of the events. But it opened my eyes to a lot of opportunities, and those opportunities ultimately led me to further my education through SCTE and make strides in my career as well as my personal development, and through the relationships and everything that you develop through the SCTE, all that's possible. And you don't have to have a degree or be the smartest guy in the room to make that happen. So I've been with Madison for 22 years now, and don't see myself doing anything else, and constantly learning and constantly evolving. So.
Yeah, so Hunter, if you wouldn't mind sharing how your career evolved.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started in cable like just about everybody else. It was a temporary thing. I got a job with my ex-brother-in-law to find something to get by after I had stopped working for my folks many years ago. I started as a contracted installer in a small country cable system outside of Atlanta. And All I did was put in the old DCT 2000s, the original General Instruments, the big ones, the ones that were really deep. All I had to know how to do was cut jumpers and put boxes in. And they told me as a contract installer, if you can talk them into additional boxes, that's $25 a pop for you. So I would talk every house into 4 or 5 boxes easily. Might have forgotten to mention the monthly charge that came with each additional box, but statute of limitations on that kind is probably expired. So did that for a while, no surprise. All of the technicians in the field where I was dropping in all these boxes got irritated quick because I didn't check signal. I didn't change ground blocks or splitters or go up a pole or anything. I didn't know how to. I didn't know you were supposed to do that. So that concept got introduced to me, and it really quickly I figured out this was a very technical job, and I actually got me excited about this might be something I want to do. Came in-house with Charter in June of 2000. I was an installer 1 for a week, and then they made me a service tech 1 or something like that because the right place, right time, somebody had left or moved on to something else, something along those lines. So what I figured out really quickly was the technical details of how things work were much more exciting to me than, well, if you change enough parts, you get it to work. So studied and got lucky enough to get exposed to, even before I came in-house with Charter, exposed to the NCTI courses and a SCTE certification. Started studying those. And what I told the group in the morning session for this is I got made fun of relentlessly for studying my NCTI courses, for taking the time and energy put into it, because I really wanted to understand the principles of RF propagation, the electronic principles behind the amplifiers and things like that. The electrical principles that matter to us because we're drawing power from the electrical grid out on our poles or, from our pedestals or whatever, where our power supplies sit. And I just became more fascinated with the technical aspects of it. So after a while, I got very lucky and was able to be pulled into what we used to call a tech ops supervisor role, what all these fine folks do over here on the wall. And did that for about 3.5 years in Fenton, and then moved on to a whole different part of the business. It was called a sales engineering role with Charter Business at the time. It's called Spectrum Enterprise today. And it was not cable at all. It was very different to me, and I really stressed and anguished over the decision to make that switch. I had a really nice human resources fella tell me to just get the hell over yourself. It's not that big a deal. It's all the cable business. The cable business is at 99% what's going on in the field, and then there's just all this other crap in the back end of it. It's all the cable business. So that was an important life lesson for me to stop stressing about stuff. When an opportunity presents itself, take advantage of it. And then I just followed a career path where it was all IP and networking from there. And I never lost my roots in the cable business, and the cable side of the house, and in the field side of the house, and the coax and HFC side of the house. It's never gone away. I remember sort of kind of most of what I used to know. I'm rusty, but if you put a wrench in my hands today, as much as I would be mad at you for it, I could do the job, at least competently, I'm sure. So I've always carried that with me. I've been a part of the Gateway chapter of SCTE on the board since 2005. And I've just always tried to stay as far as I get. And the IP network part of the business that I'm in now is not even on the service provider side of the business. It's not even customer facing anymore. It's all internal. So I'm about as far away from the coax in the field and HFC that you can get. I'm still cling to those roots because they are what got me where I am. And frankly, the work ethic that I learned from the folks ahead of me in the field, the ones who worked hard and made a career out of it, I still bring it every single day of this job. And there's a lot of times where, just like you guys sitting out here, go, what a bunch of sissies. You think you know what hard work is? Come dig this hole with me. Come climb this pole with me. It's where the tap's 45 feet up and 6 feet off the pole. You don't know what hard work is. So I like to bring that attitude with me because it helps me remember not to be a spoiled brat in my, nice little office job. So yeah, that's where I'm at today. So still doing it.
So you had a journey, right, that you started as an IT or a installer, and then DCT installer, then I think you went to Charter Business, and then now you're director of IT at Charter. What resources did you use, either through the SCTE or through other organizations, to help develop yourself into the position you have today?
Yeah, for sure. I will say that those early NCTI courses and the desire to acquire that master certification, it was a big deal to me. And even after I left the field, I finished the last of my courses so that I could get that master certification. And then I think I tacked one more on the end of that for master technician HFC systems or something like that. That one's forever. They can't take it away from me. It doesn't expire. To me, that's offers legitimacy to, no, I know the cable business. I'm a part of the cable. I'm a part of this family. Just because my boots ain't dirty doesn't mean I'm not a part of this family. That actually means a lot to me because I'm very proud of the business we're in and the work that all of you do every day and that we have done in the past. SCTE and the relationships in SCTE and the certifications that I did have but have expired for SCTE were all kind of stepping stones to each new phase of my career. For me, we've talked about degrees and things like that here. I did finally go back and finish my bachelor's, and then last year I finished my master's and I got my MBA. But those were all things that I got kind of after the fact. They weren't things that got me to where I am today. Probably there'll be things that are useful to help me get to where I'm hopefully going in the future at the executive level, but it was really just hard work and certain determination and the willingness to learn that got me to the point that I'm at now.
So Dennis, how about yourself? I remember you, at some point, I think, kind of a light bulb went off or flipped a switch, but I can remember you studying for certification tests, right? On your lunch hour, I remember a 3-reading binder you had was either a certification study binder or a course you were taking, but I can remember, right, sticky notes all the way around 3 sides of that with handwritten notes of, I guess, what was contained underneath that tab. So how did the SCTE or what did you do kind of to develop your career from where you were at?
Yeah, like I said, it started with the cable games and, you know, it is a competition, but it really helped me understand how the cable system worked, how the tools worked, things that we weren't using in the field at the time, we were learning to use during the cable games. Being involved in the SCTE, ultimately, you know, like Lynn said, made a switch go off that, hey, there's more to this industry than just what I'm doing. So the cable games in specific, you know, made me, I don't know where it's going with that, so we'll go a different direction here, but, you know, eventually I remember being in the warehouse and Lynn coming over, it was election times, and, asked if anybody wanted to join the board. And I raised my hand and I'm glad I did because it's probably one of the best decisions I made for my career and my personal life in general. It opened up, doors that I didn't know were even there and made me realize that it was a career. So, you know, when I first started, I heard about the SCTE courses and NCTI courses and, you know, nobody was really taking them in our company. So that's one way that I felt I could stand out and further my career there was to better understand how everything worked and to begin taking those courses. So yeah, I study a lot of my personal time, a lot of my lunch hours. You know, I think a lot of us will sit up here and tell you we're not the smartest guy in the room. So, you know, I'm a firm believer in you don't have to retain everything, but you got to know where that information is when you need it. So that's kind of the thing behind the tabs. I always know where I can go to find some of that information. I remember I read it here, I read it there, and, you know, getting that when you need it is huge. SCTE is really, as far as training, has helped me out a ton, but the other side of that is the networking. And we'll probably touch on that in a little bit, but, you know, I would never have the relationships I have today with Hunter and Kai and Dick and Tom without the SCT and the opportunities that it presented to me early on in my career to, you know, network and make those relationships. So.
Very good. Yeah, so one thing I remember about the cable games was years ago, right, there were certain meters, PDRs, even signal level meters and the concept of loss of splitters and taps and cable loss, right? That maybe we weren't as strong as a company that we should be or needed to be. So, how about through the cable games, right? learning basic concepts, making it fun. I mean, did you see that as one of the benefits of the cable games?
Yeah, most definitely. I like to tell people there's things I've learned in the cable games that I use every day as a technician. And I don't know how people that don't understand them, troubleshoot or go much further than the tap, on a case of trouble. So things like the meter reading event, and where you have to understand, the loss throughput and things like that of different devices and be able to calculate that in your head. As a technician, I use that every day. And it was something I didn't do, up until I started participating in the cable games. That event alone taught me how to, pull over to the side of the road and check my maps, my system maps, and add up all of the losses that should be there. And, divide and conquer from there. Once I started applying those things to my everyday job, it became so much easier. And the calls that I was making to my supervisors or people that had been there longer than me that knew, those stopped because I didn't have to call anybody anymore. And eventually people started calling me. So it, I definitely learned a lot from the cable games. Just that one event, totally changed how I approach troubleshooting in everyday life. So.
And I believe I've seen you, right, when you go to the national show, you competed well enough that the local chapter said, or paid for your trip to the cable games, or to the SCTE Expo, right? I think you went around and visited various booths, basically use that as an opportunity to educate yourself, become a better technician, professionally develop yourself. So, commend you for that. How about the Gateway chapter? Right, a lot of people think Gateway chapter, right, is the monthly technical sessions that we put on, right? You show up and you learn about DOCSIS, or you learn about cable modems, or you learn about PDRs, right? But what other benefits have you two seen as being a member, participating member in the Gateway chapter or even on the board?
Yeah, we're repeating what Tom and Dick even said earlier, which is the opportunity to network and get to know people. For some people, the networking you do directly on the board sets you up for the next job opportunity. For some people, it may never yield an actual job opportunity, but it gives you a connection, a family of people that you can rely on when you need something. I can honestly say the folks that I've been on the chapter board with for a really long time, I would be very comfortable calling them with like a personal issue. Hey, can you help me with this? I'm in a jam. Can you help me out? As much as I would with a professional issue. And I believe that for the most part, they would be there for me. I genuinely believe that. So these are pretty long lasting, genuine friendships that we tend to make on these things. It's a volunteer board. None of us is paid to be here. We're literally here because we actually care about the business and we want to leave a really, really nice legacy for the people that follow behind us. So to me, that's the networking and those opportunities, as much as anything career wise, is probably the biggest benefit that I can think of.
Yeah, it's certainly training and all the things Lynn said, but, for me, when I look back at the things that I've been able to do or accomplish or participate in because of SCTE, it's because of the people. People like Tom and Dick, to have two Hall of Fame SCTE members in our chapter is huge. I think we don't utilize it as much as we should personally, but the relationships across the world that I've made through SCTE and the opportunities to go to Expo. And I told this story in the morning session, but there's a electrical engineer from Germany who is on a lot of the standards and SCTE papers. He writes a lot of the standards for things, and I spend a lot of time with him when I can at Expo because he just is a wealth of knowledge and he's willing to share it with me, and that's everybody in this business. So. As much as I'm looking for his validation or feedback, he's constantly reiterating to me that no, you're the technician, you're the guy on the ground that makes these ideas in my head work. So he wants to know from my perspective how they actually work in the real world, because a lab environment in the real world, we all know, are can be two different things sometimes, so. As much as I value the time that he's taking out of his personal time at Expo, when you only have 3 or 4 days to accomplish all your goals there, you know, he's likewise valuing the conversation and feedback that I'm giving him, so, you know, I used to tell everybody at these shows or training events that, you know, when I joined the board, they would ask me, what do you do? Are you a manager? Are you in charge of this? Where do you work? And I always say, well, I'm just a technician, you know, but it was kind of odd for a technician to be on the board. I felt at least, and, you know, over time, I realized that I wasn't just a technician and that none of you are just technicians. It's what you want to make of it. And the opportunities are in front of you. You just gotta be willing to open your eyes and see them and take advantage of them. So.
Very good. So one thing we've talked about the local chapter, right? And we talked about the cable games, but there's another event, and the Cable Tech Expo, that's the national trade show, basically. But there's also another event, which is called the Chapter Leadership Conference, which is basically where the 50 different chapter leaders have the opportunity to get together, as well as others can participate, but commonly it's a lot of those people. But the SCT gets everybody together and talks about SCTE matters and things. So I think you both attended that leadership conference, so maybe provide a little bit about maybe what you thought it was when you first went and maybe what you found it to be once you attended or participated.
Yeah, so the first CLC I went to was actually, I think in 2009, which would have been in Salt Lake City. I promise you, I never would have been in Salt Lake City, Utah if I hadn't gone to CLC that year. It is an eerily clean downtown, like creepy clean, like there's no gum on the sidewalk. But it was a cool experience. I got to go see the Mormon Tabernacle Choir do a dress rehearsal or something. It was incredible. Oklahoma City never would have been there for that. And you didn't ask this directly, but I find it to be useful information. Basically, I saw it as, and I continue to see it as a scenario where first and foremost, what are you guys and gals doing in your chapter that's working well for you? Hey, Gateway, you guys are pretty good. You got lots of awards and done great things from an SCTE chapter perspective. What's working for you? How are you addressing these challenges that these other chapters are seeing? That's really the primary purpose of it. What I think I'm beginning to see, and I'm personally going to keep advocating for, is we're beginning to move towards actually talking about leadership from a broader perspective. I think it's something we lack at a very serious level in our industry, and frankly, outside of the industry too. There's almost no place you go where before you got a supervisor or manager job, they told you how to supervise or manage. So it doesn't happen. And what little training they give you is not very earth-shattering. It's not that useful in my opinion. To me, I think we need to do better at that. And I think really for the folks who say, you know, in some form or fashion, leadership is in my future, it's something I want to do. I want to give the opportunity for somebody to actually formally be trained on what it's like to do a supervisor or manager job day to day. What it means to hire the right people and only the right people. Some of you have heard this speech from me before, so I apologize. How to hold people accountable, how to give them the appreciation that they deserve. You know, that basic day-to-day stuff, basic blocking and tackling, nobody's teaching that anywhere. So for me, I think it's maybe has an opportunity to begin to evolve into that. And I'm kind of hopeful I can maybe help that happen because I think it makes sense.
Yeah, I agree with Hunter. The initial thought behind CLC is to help new chapter leaders develop themselves in the roles that they're taking on in the chapter. You know, secretary training, president training, what's successful, how to turn in the documents correctly, all of that, right? And I think it is evolving. In years past, there's been less vendor participation. In the last couple of years, that's kind of ramped up, and I see it going in that direction. I think one of the unique things, maybe not so unique, or something you might not be so surprised of, is the people who are chapter leaders are also leaders within their organization. You know, the Comcast, the Charters, the big companies of the world, right? It's become a opportunity for someone like myself. I consider such a small fish in a big pond, you know, to have the opportunity to talk to the Michael Dells and the people that make the decisions and they're developing the technology that Comcast is using, you know, the people that develop the software for the meters, it's going towards more of the expo route and leadership route on top of the training aspect that really makes it an opportunity, even more so than expo sometimes. I felt this past year that I had more one-on-one time with people that could answer my technical questions of problems that they've seen in the past or that I'm currently going through or whatever. The front, the FaceTime you get with those individuals at CLC is becoming just as valuable as the couple days I spent at Expo. So, leadership is a huge thing. It's in the name of the event, but I feel like we're severely lacking in that area. Everyone in the room has the same problems, and we're all trying to solve them in different ways. What's great about it is you maybe pick a little bit from this chapter, what they're doing, and this chapter is very successful in this aspect. Maybe I can learn something from them, and you put it all together. Maybe it's a totally different solution that you have that works for you that doesn't work for somebody else, but you're able to see what's working and what's not. And like I said, ultimately everybody has the same issues. It's how do we all solve them as a group and individually, and you can kind of take a little bit from everybody and bring it back here locally and hopefully make a difference for the members of our local chapter.
Yeah, so what I think is really neat about this is the fact that for somebody that wants to develop themselves, right, professionally or advance themselves, right, our whole industry kind of supports that, right? I'm not so sure that all industries kind of operate like that, but I think the cable industry does operate like that, and there's a society, right? The Society of Cable TV Engineers. There's a group of people that basically are there to help others develop, right? Because somebody in prior years helped them, so they want to basically give back. And there's multiple opportunities, right? Whether it's a chapter meeting or the chapter group or the national trade show, the SCTE Expo, or even leadership conferences that are there for those who want to do that, and the opportunities are there. So I think that's great that the whole industry kind of embraces that, as well as you go to an event, chapter leadership conference that we were just talking about, and you think you're going to get trained on how to be a treasurer, right? How to use the QuickBooks software and input debits and credits and do those things. But what it ends up being is, I think you just said, Dennis, a mini technical conference, right? Because you're meeting with other technical people or technical people, and you're discussing other topics such as amplifiers or test equipment or whatever. So I think that's great that our industry is in a position that has that for those who want it. Hunter, you look like you're gonna say something now.
Yeah, it occurred to me, and it's sort of related, that, for example, in Oklahoma City this year, we sat down to a breakfast and just happened to sit next to us 2 or 3 folks from the Alaska chapter, wasn't it? Never would have run across those folks, and surprise, surprise, they have some unique problems they're dealing with way up there, where their weather conditions are different, their personnel are spread more than any of us know anything about, and so on and so forth. So same thing, exposure, you just can't get any in the way that I can see.
Very good. How about, when you decided you wanted something more from where you're at, so whatever position you're in, you decided, hey, I'm kind of maybe max myself out here. I want something different, right? Kind of getting out of your comfort zone, if you will. Can you, either of you or both of you, speak towards how you went about doing that, and maybe what mechanisms you use to support you through that?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, every single stage of my career in which I felt like I was ready to move to the next thing took way too long, and it was annoying. And I don't understand why the rest of the world doesn't see how great I am, because that's just how I saw it. It turns out it wasn't as great as I thought it was. Primarily what I would do is I would apply for jobs. 99 times out of 100, I get nothing back. or I'd get the form email rejection or whatever, you know, at the time. A few times I would get a phone call from somebody to say, especially if it was within the company, hey, I'm gonna be upfront with you. I'm not gonna interview you, but I do wanna talk to you. You're an internal candidate and I respect the fact that you're doing this. You're nowhere near the mark. Let me tell you what you could work on to get closer to the mark. Those conversations were actually hugely valuable to me, because one, they didn't give me false hopes by going ahead and interviewing me to be polite, knowing they weren't gonna hire me. That's just a stupid waste of people's time. But two, they gave me actual usable, valuable information. In the modern world, you do not get good feedback on why you didn't get hired. They don't even tell you you didn't get hired. You just notice that they never called you again. It's ridiculous. So for me, applying for jobs made sense, but then a lot of it was I always looked for a mentor of some kind. And some of the folks in this area will remember some of the names like Sean Gallagher, Dan Bauer. When I had opportunities at different shows or different events or different scenarios, I just walked up and shook the hand of Tom Gorman or Keith Hayes or Ron Renack. I just was bold enough to do it. Scared out of my mind, but I just figured the worst they could do is say, I'm too important, you don't get to talk to me. Turns out not a single one of them ever did. Never once did Tom or Dick Beard say, look, I got, 17 times the amount of time in the business that you have. I've forgotten more about cable than you're ever gonna learn. Get away from me, dude. Never once. They were always very warm and welcoming and accommodating. I cannot tell you how many conversations I had with those folks, or for Tom and Keith. Keith Hayes is one of my favorite examples, how he gets so excited that I was excited about a particular SCTE certification or a particular thing, and he wanted to talk about it endlessly. He could chatter about it endlessly because he was just genuinely happy to see more people coming along that wanted to learn. It just, that excited him, I think, more than any of the technology ever did. And he's still doing it today at the company he's at now, at IMCO, I believe it is. So for me, the mechanisms were the networking, and then, I am one of those that I apply relentlessly for jobs, and I'll interview over and over until I finally get good at interviewing, because I'm not naturally good at it, and it goes where it goes. In retrospect, my straight line that I thought I wanted to be on, how do I get from here to where the beard is? That should be a straight line. I just do this job, this job, this job for these number of years. Again, why aren't people hiring me? Don't they see I have this line? I'm trying to, what's wrong with you people? Turns out it's a winding, twisting path that you cannot predict or understand until after it's over with and you look backwards and go, I guess it makes sense now. I can connect the dots and see this is what life, the universe, I don't know what you want to call it, had in store for me. And I did not get it at the time.
So looking back, right, you had fear of maybe leaving your comfort zone and going and doing something different. Was that all well-founded looking back on it? Do you feel differently or?
No, and I think I alluded to earlier in an answer I gave that first it was leaving the field meant the death of my cable career. That's never been farther from the truth. There's 100,000 people at our company today, and all the other companies have all the functions we have at a larger or smaller scale. And the business is all of those things, all of the back office, all of the optical networks, all of the core and backbone networks, all of the routing and switching networks, all of the call center technologies, all of the people answering phones in the call center, all of the tools that everybody uses every day. It's just, there's so many possible avenues. And I think I said it already once since we've been sitting down, or it was the morning session, I've lost track. There are more opportunities today in this business than there have ever been. It's orders of magnitude more. There was a time where your only realistic way if you were ever going to change jobs or move up in a job is if you were willing to move halfway across the country for the technician 2 or whatever the next thing was on your list. It's nothing like that anymore.
Very good. Dennis, how about any stories about leaving your comfort zone or advancement?
Yeah, I think anytime you think about making that next step, it's a scary thing. And you don't know what you don't know, what the outcome is going to be, or if it's the biggest mistake of your life, or, one of the things that SCTE's helped me with is communication and, just, seeking out people like Tom and Dick, like Hunter said, you get good at communicating with people. And, when you take that next step in leadership, a lot of times the case is that you're going to be, managing people that you've worked side by side with for the last 10 or 15 years. And that's tough, and it's a scary thing because you go from being a peer to now having to, to somewhat, the only real way to say it is to lead those people, right? And you know, that's a very scary thing, and that definitely takes you out of your comfort zone. And, you know, you learn through communicating with different people that everybody communicates differently. And you can't just be one person every day to everybody. You have to adapt and you know, communicate differently to everybody because not everyone communicates the same. And I think as a leader, that's a very hard thing to do on a daily basis because you know, you get stuck in your roles and the other things that you're doing, and it's very easy to get in a rut, so to say. And before you know it, you know, a group of 10 people, a couple of them are upset about this or upset about that, and you don't even notice it unless you're paying attention at all times and communicating with your guys and your team as best as you can. So, you know, a lot of those things are scary, and it started out for me with the SCTE certifications. You know, I found that once I passed one and took it and was successful, they became easier. But there's always that fear of taking that first step. And, you know, once I passed one, then the next guy passed it, and then on and so on and so on. It became a domino effect in the group where everybody becomes certified when they get hired. You know, it's up to you to take that as far as you want, you know. Hunter spoke of the feedback that he got from the jobs he didn't get, you know, that's great. And it doesn't happen in the real world, like he said, but at some point, you know, Hunter has to take that information and physically do something with it to make it meaningful and to get over the fear of making that step is the hardest part, I think. Every time, because you don't know what the outcome's gonna be, but you know, I think they said in the morning session, sometimes you look back and you're grateful you didn't get that opportunity that you were living your life for so long. And the path that you took that may have been an alternate one ends up being the right one for you, so.
Very good. So, do we have any questions for these gentlemen from the audience?
When you move to, whenever you move to the charter business side of things, what certifications or training help you whenever you moved out of the field into more of a networking IT role?
Great question. I have a really funny story, weird story to get where I got as a result. So I didn't have any experience or knowledge in the IP side of the world. So I sort of fell into a job that was a hybrid sales engineering position. Because of my certifications, and I guess I'm trying to speak as humbly as I can because I don't want to sound arrogant. But my ability to get in front of people and speak intelligently and put on grown-up clothes and look like I know how to dress myself and you know, clean up. They felt like it was a good opportunity for me to sort of sit in a position between the sales department in a sales engineering role and our construction group. Because there was a huge gap. There was a chasm between those groups. Construction was like, you've got to stop telling people this will be cheap and free. It takes me, I got to get all across these railroad tracks under a river. What are you doing? Sales, of course, was like construction makes everything hard. They say everything's expensive. How can a 25-foot build cost $25,000? It's not possible. Well, it was. So my job was to bridge the gap between the two with my HFC and construction and field knowledge and the fact that they felt like I could communicate intelligently. What happened was I worked myself completely out of a job in less than a year. I was sitting around doing nothing for weeks. So I'm like, they're going to fire me. There's nothing for me to do here. So I started studying for my CCNA, which is what the part of the world that all of the other sales engineers were involved in. I was sort of a pretend sales engineer. And I think I was an experiment, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. Started studying for my CCNA, and then the opportunity came up as they needed someone who what Charter calls a Field Tech 6 today is the one who puts in the fiber CPE for all your fiber customers. And they didn't have a defined program or a philosophy or a group that did that at that time. And they talked about, hey, let's try him at that. He might be good. Same thing as when I put cable boxes in. It was the equivalent of cutting a jumper and dropping in a DCT, except it was plugging in fiber jumpers, paste in this config. All you have to do is put in VLANs and IPs. And if it works, great, move on with your life. Me being who I was, I took advantage of the opportunity to really oh my gosh, this is the coolest stuff I've ever done in my life. Oh, I want to do this for a living. So I learned as much as I could and dove in as deep as I could. I got my CCNA. I never did sit for my CCNP, but the studies that I did for my NP got me to the point technically from a ability to converse in the field that I never even needed that certification. People knew that I knew what I was talking about. What I told the morning session that applies here is that I'm the slowest learner in the room, any room I'm standing in. It takes me a long time to understand a concept. Some of you that have trained in classes with me have heard me say this before. It's just for whatever reason, I don't pick up things quickly. I have to do repetition on a much, much deeper level than the average human. Everybody in here is gonna learn something faster than me. But I'm also the most competitive person in a room, any given room. I have an unhealthy competitive streak. Like, I probably need therapy, seriously. So, because I'm pissed at the fact that all of you get to learn faster than I do, and that's not fair, I'm just gonna try really, really hard to know it better than you did. Now, realistically, you don't know there's a competition, and nor should you care. In my head, there's a competition. I have to beat you. I have to crush you. I have to crush your soul. Well, you're never gonna know how hard I tried. You're never really gonna care. But it does lend itself to putting me in a position that, okay, now I really understand this technology. So the boss that I had at the time said, when I said, hey, can I configure on the core as well as the CPE? Can I run the jumpers in the head end? Can I drop the lasers and the cards in? His exact words were, I will give you all the rope you need. Climb up or hang yourself. It's up to you. And he did, and I had that opportunity. You don't do that today in our company at all. All those have been segmented and cordoned off and all that other fun stuff. But that's what got me there. So right place, right time, right personality and attitude, frankly, along with some of those SCTE certifications were literally the thing that took a group who didn't know cable and coax. Well, he's got all these certifications. He has to know what he's doing. That was like a leg up, and then once they interviewed me and talked to me, it just seemed to be a good fit for their little experiment, so got lucky. Preparation and something luck. You guys have any other questions?
So to add on a little bit, I don't know if you folks were in the room at the end of the last session, but I think you heard me, did you hear me reference a Zig Ziglar comment? Did that ring a bell with anybody? Okay, so 1980s, 1990s, there's a gentleman, Zig Ziglar. He's a professional development motivational speaker, right? And he has a bit or a line where he talks about advancing yourself. And, you know, somebody that wanted the next promotion, and basically they couldn't figure out why they weren't getting it, because they were doing everything that was asked of them, right? They were doing the installs, and they were running the troubles, and they were doing all that stuff. And Zig Ziglar's response to that is, it's when you start doing the things that you're not expected to do, right? You're doing everything that you should, but then you're also doing the things that you're not necessarily, aren't your job, if you will. So I think that's what you described, Hunter, about running the jumpers in the head end and
Can I do more? Can I learn more? Absolutely.
yeah. So I think that's really when you see yourself take it to a next level, prepare yourself for that next promotion, and possibly your supervisor see that in you when you're doing those things that basically aren't necessarily your job. Yeah, okay. All right. Thank you, Jeremy. Any other questions? I'll give, Dennis, would you like to say something?
Yeah, I'd just like to, you know, point out that, you know, everybody on this panel today has influenced me in some way in my career early on. You know, whether it be Dick and Tom when I got introduced to the board, you know, Hunter, Lynn, of course. I remember going to vendor days early on, and back then we had seminars, training seminars during the vendor day. So, you know, we would always get there early and participate in the training. Hunter was always the guy doing the training, just turned out as I recall it. You know, so like I said this morning, I said he ain't gonna put out the door today with his head, but it'd be so big. But, you know, I would have conversations with Hunter after the training and, you know, hey, how did you get to where you're at? And, you know, he would share his journey with me. And, you know, I was young at the time and very impressionable. And, you know, a lot of the things that he was doing opened my eyes that, hey, maybe I should be doing some of those things, because I see a guy that's, you know, doing exactly what Lynn just said, everything he's supposed to be doing, but also all of these other things that surely are going to get noticed. So, you know, when you talk about leadership and the people who are on this panel, every one of them here today has influenced me in many ways and continue to. And Hunter is the reason I started going down the SCTE training path, because it was there and an opportunity. And I think, you know, everybody in this room, if I could give you one piece of advice, would be to just look around you and find the people in your daily life whether it be at your job or maybe it's at another place that you spend time, you know, find the people who are leaders, who are doing those things and learn as much as you can from them, surround yourself with them, and, you know, let them impress upon you the way that they do things, because it's infectious, and when you start doing them yourself, you see the results. You know, so there's many leaders in our organization, you know, I have a very good problem, right? I have multiple technicians and team members that are all looking for that next step, and they're all, for the most part, showing every day that they want to do that, you know, so that's a good problem to have. Question was asked in the earlier session, you know, what are we looking for that next opportunity? You know, what does it look like, and what are we looking for in those types of individuals? And my answer was that, you know, we're looking for people who are already, you know, on already doing the things that are above and beyond what you're being asked to do on a daily basis. So a good sign over there, it says zero talent. List 10 things that take zero talent to do every day. Show up to work, be on time, be present, that type of stuff. Those are the things that you're expected to do every day. You know, it's above and beyond that. The people who are showing today that they're ready for that next step, because when that next step comes, you know, you might a light go off in your head that says, oh man, I think I'm ready for this. But someone from our perspective might not have seen that yet out of you, and have seen it from 2 or 3 other people for the last 5 years, and that puts you a step behind. So I guess my message is be prepared at all times for that next step, because you never know when it's gonna come.
Yeah, I would agree. One thing that I think of, and I should have said this in the morning session too, is oftentimes you're in a situation where you see the possibility or the opportunity for your doing more than what's explicitly defined for your role. In most cases, the company, your management, your teammates, they're happy to have that. They'd love to see more of you, and they're decent people and kind people who frankly want to see you succeed too. Every once in a while, you run to a place where the second you dip your toe in that water, you get smacked back. Don't do that. That's not your job. Do your job. Shut up and do your job. I would contend, you don't have to do what I say. Remember, I'm the slowest learner in the room. I might not have figured this out yet, but I would contend that's probably not the right place for you. You're probably never going to get where you want to go. You're probably going to be miserable for a really long time before the light bulb turns on and you realize it's not for you. I don't think anybody here is working for groups or organizations like that, frankly, but we know they exist. Let's not be unrealistic. There are places you go, you will get stuck in a pigeonhole and you will never emerge. Do not die a slow death there. You're smarter than that. So do what you can to do more. In fact, for me, in my leadership organization where I work, we kind of have a semi-unwritten rule of they need to have already be demonstrating that they're already doing that next job, that next level engineer. And for example, in my organization, before we give them the next job, someone could say, hey, that's no fair. That kind of feels like we're cheating. I don't make the rules. That's just the way it tends to work. That's not an uncommon position at all. It's very common in companies all around the world.
All right, thank you. So last chance for questions. Any closing?
Do it.
Oh,
Hold this question for 30 minutes, just admit it.
go ahead.
The floor recognizes Greg McQueenie.
Well, I mean, I mean, did you guys at one point, I know like Dennis, when you first started here, between you started and you taking the, as earlier right now, you know, take a step back yourself and change it out. Your own attitude, stuff like that. Expect, let me call me back on thing. I mean, you might know a lot, but you need to have the right attitude. That's like that.
Lenny tell you to ask us.
$20 is it?
Go ahead, Len.
Dennis isn't always what you see Dennis as. He challenged the status quo, you know, for a while.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I just had
Yeah, to answer your question, you know, I think I said it in the morning group a little bit differently. It took me a long time to grow up, honestly. You know, a lot of the things that I thought I was doing internally for the betterment of the group really just made me look like, use any choice word I want, you know, to the leadership team, right? So that's where the communication comes in. I mean, learning how to communicate and how to constructively provide the feedback that I so desperately wanted them to hear. You know, I had to find a better way to do it because the way I was doing it wasn't working. you know, I thought that it was the way to go about it, and over time I had to correct a lot of things in the way that I did things on a daily basis, you know, in order to grow and adapt and to make that next step. You know, and that's a lot of the things I speak to today to some of the individuals on our team, you know, hey, I see a lot of myself in you, you know. That's not necessarily a good thing. But I think if you're dedicated and you see where you want to go and you do some of the things we've talked about today, you know, pick the people out in your life that are good communicators and good leaders and learn from them, you know. Everybody's different. Everybody has a different management style, leadership style. And yeah, sometimes you gotta self-reflect, right? And I think that's become one of my better qualities, and even with the management team and staff that's around them, you know, it's sometimes we work very well together because we're so different, but also when it comes down to it, you know, I'm able to say, hey, you know, maybe you should have went about this a different way or communicated that differently. And to be a big enough person to go home and self-reflect and say, hey, man, I really probably should have handled that differently and should next time. You know, that's where the growth takes place. So sometimes it's hard and it's very difficult, and it may not be some of the nicest things you want to say or hear about yourself, but it's what makes you who you are. And eventually, if you learn from those things, you're gonna grow and move forward. The possibilities are endless if you're that type of person.
Yeah, I think I kind of have a sense of where you're going with that question, although it's obviously a Madison loaded question anyway. But the instinct is right. So I suspect as sweet and docile as Dick Beard and Tom Jokers and for that matter, Kai and some of these others are, there was probably a time when they were butt heads too. And they had to be put in their place a time or two, get their legs chopped up from under them and the whole, yeah, Mr. Humble over here in the corner. Still know what you're talking about. And I know I was in that position too. Again, as slow a learner as I am, somehow I have convinced myself years after years that I'm smarter than everybody else, which makes absolutely no sense. You get humbled one way or the other. You're going to get humbled, even if it's that you find yourself in the same place you think you're not supposed to be anymore after 5, after 10, after 15 years. We all know people whose own personality is literally the thing keeping them from moving to what it is they think they deserve or that they're owed. So you do end up getting humbled. One of the pieces of advice I like to give people that doesn't make sense until you have the opportunity to see it make sense is simply being right is never enough of an excuse to open your big fat mouth, ever. The reason you open your mouth has to be about more than proving you're right or that you're the smartest one in the room. I know in engineering circles, we struggle with that mightily. We have lots of engineers whose entire motivation is proving they're the smartest one and they got to the answer first. And they trample all over each other and act like jerks to do it. Nobody likes working with them. Well, that's not directly what you were talking about. That's one of those lessons that once you figure it out, and despite the fact that you have the right answer to whatever everyone's discussing, you keep your mouth shut and you wait. And maybe you nudge people in the direction of the right answer. And they feel like they've arrived at the conclusion or the solution correctly on their own. And all you do is help them get there. That's actually way more satisfying than proving you're the smartest one in the room. Takes a lot of emotional, professional maturity to get there. I know I learned a lot of hard lessons on my way there, and I still probably get it wrong more often than I get it right. It's things like that that contribute to the phenomenon that you were kind of alluding to in your question. So you do have to learn. Yeah.
Thanks for the question, Ray. All right, any other questions?
I'm good with that. Being good.
Okay, good. So is there another?
All right. Yeah, so just some closing thoughts here and we'll call it a day. So might have heard this when you, at the end of the last session, but I'll say it again if you did. My dad, right? My dad was a pharmacist by trade, right? He went to college, St. Louis College of Pharmacy, and ran a pharmacy for years and years. Got out of the pharmacy business and got into the telecom business, right? Kind of two polar opposites, if you will. But one thing he always said is, if it took a genius, I wouldn't be here. It takes somebody willing to learn and apply themselves. So I think those are good words to professionally live by, right? That you don't have to be a genius, right? We're not building rockets here. in cable, right? We're installing cable telecommunication services. So, if you just, realize that you can do it, accept it, and work hard towards it, and just keep pushing, you'll be successful, right? Whether it's doing installs or whether it's the next promotion above installs. And there's a ton of resources available to you, right? You've got people that are dedicated to the industry and helping others get better themselves. There's whole societies, right? Society of Cable TV Engineers, plus a ton of other resources available to you. You gotta step back and realize like where you need help and what's there to help you, and kind of maybe ask for it or pursue it, basically. And there's endless opportunities, especially in this industry. I know Tom had a worry previously that, right, there's not the same opportunities in the cable industry now that there were when he started back in the eighties or the seventies. And I would maybe argue something slightly different. I would say that today, fiber optics is what coax was in the seventies, right? And video and coax were in the seventies is kind of what the internet and fiber is today. The government, federal government's right, releasing $42 billion in BEAD money to build fiber optic networks across the United States. I think Missouri's getting, I believe, 1.7 billion, and I think Illinois is getting 1 billion or 1.2 billion. So, right, just in our kind of two-state region, there's $2 to $2.5 billion over the next couple, 3-4 years that's out there, and just endless opportunities in probably any area of the industry, right? Whether it's construction or sales or installations or distribution, right? All kinds of stuff out there that probably back in the seventies and eighties is equivalent. So, lots of opportunities. So just, take advantage of it.
Yeah, let me tack onto that real quick. To be fair, a lot of what Tom and his peers, colleagues, contemporaries is the word I was looking for, had to do by necessity back then was solve the problems of delivering the signal in a reliable and clean way. Because it hadn't been solved yet in some cases, or not at a grand scale, or not 43 amplifiers deep, or whatever the case was. It feels like today, hey, all the problems have been solved. Somebody smarter than us figured out all the things of the thing. There's like 742 bajillion QAM now, or whatever it is, right? So there's nothing left for us to solve. All we gotta do is change parts. We don't want to fall into that trap. We don't have to fall into that trap. That entrepreneurial spirit is still alive and well in cable, probably more than just about any technical industry, in my opinion. The places you go to find those opportunities are the places that you're not thinking about on a regular basis, but are right in front of you. So I'm not telling you this to brag. I'm telling you this to illustrate a point. I've got 1 patent under my belt already, and I got 5 or 6 more that are in process right now. It is not because I'm super smart. It's because things don't work the way I wish they would. And I'm like, why couldn't it just do this? And finally, I got exposed to the right people and the right opportunities to go, oh, why doesn't it just do this on paper? Well, what would this look like? Make a flow chart. Write a paragraph that describes it. Draw a crude picture with a crayon or a pencil. And then figure out how you would make it work if you could make it work. We have those opportunities. We just tend to assume if you think of a really neat thing, there's a better way to turn this wrench. There's a better way to tighten this connector. There's a better way for me if I do my meter here this way first before I pull this faceplate or whatever the version of the story is today. That's actually the bestest way. Turns out you might have a very patentable or unique original idea. We just assume, smarter people than me have already figured that out. There's no point. More often than not, you're actually the first one to think of it the exact way you're thinking of it. You know, the on the way to work in the vehicle and the shower ideas that you have all the time that you dismiss within 5 minutes of having them. Turns out most of the time you have a brilliant idea. Now, will you make $1 billion off of it? Probably not. For me, I don't care. None of us got into cable to be rich. If there's anybody who did, you're surprising. Yeah, I'm sure you're disappointed. So we're here for another reason. I think that's one of the reasons we're here. So in that sense, it's still there. It just doesn't feel quite the same as it did back then. And maybe the opportunities are significantly different. I don't know.
Yeah, the opportunities are definitely there. When Tom said that, it sparked something in me that, you know, I really had to think about it for a second because I've never looked at our industry in that way that, you know, there's no opportunity. So, you know, one thing to expand upon what they said is, you know, new guys in this industry, you know, when I came in, I thought I was at a great disadvantage because I had no idea what Madison even did. You know, and I get thrown into doing installs and troubleshooting. And then along come cable modems and things that the guys that had been there for a couple of years didn't understand either. And that leveled the playing field, you know, and it gave me an opportunity to say, well, that looks interesting. I'm not afraid of it like some of the other guys were. And I excelled in that, which gave me time to catch up on the RF side and the things that those guys already learned. That same opportunity for new technicians and people in our industry is still there with fiber. And with RFI and all these new technologies, DOCSIS 4, you know, it levels every couple of years, the playing field gets leveled again. So, you know, if you're new in this industry and you feel like you don't have the same opportunity as somebody that's been in it for 10 or 15 years, that's simply just not the truth, because all you have to do is find that next thing and latch onto it and become an expert at that. And that's going to be the next thing you're gonna have years upon years of return on that investment, you know, and then you can learn some of the other stuff that maybe, you know, the nuts and bolts, you know, but that's kind of how I did it. And I think the opportunity for that with fiber right now is the same. You know, Lynn made that comment, and it's kind of stuck with me for the last couple of weeks that, you know, the Tom and the Dick of fiber might be sitting in this room. And that's the truth. In the next few years, everything's going that direction and you become that fiber expert, and the RF guys of the world, you know, what we know doesn't apply as much anymore. So it's ever evolving, ever changing, and the opportunities are just immense right now, in my opinion. And SCTE, our companies that we work for that provide us the opportunity to participate in those things. All you have to do is open your eyes to see the opportunities and be the type of person like Hunter who takes that criticism from the job you didn't get or whatever it is and says, hey, I'm going to use that and become better and make myself more marketable and employable. And playing field's level for all new people as well as the guys that have been there forever.
Very good. Well, if you would, please give these gentlemen a round of applause.
So I'm gonna throw one more thing at you because it would be unfair if I didn't share it with you the way the first session got to hear it. At least two of you in the room have heard it from me before ad nauseum, so apologize. It is not uncommon for me as a hiring manager, and I'm making it clear up front. I'm not speaking for any other leaders or managers anywhere else, because I don't know that anyone else does it like this, but it's not uncommon for me to hire people who on paper, on the resume, do not qualify. For me and my particular approach, and this is where the advice part comes from here at the tail end, is I'm looking for 3 specific attributes, character traits in the person. Every line item on the resume is secondary to those 3 attributes. You gotta have all 3 of them or you don't get hired. There are people who suggest that is an unethical approach to hiring. Fire me then. We'll keep doing it till they do. The stuff on the resume does matter to some degree. Degrees, certifications, knowledge, experience, that stuff does matter. It's not pointless. I don't want to devalue it. It's just that these other things prove who's a superstar consistently, almost 100% of the time, much better than anything you're going to read on the resume. So the first suggestion I have to you is be humble. Be genuinely humble inside. Put your ego on the shelf. It's not about you and what you get out of it. It's about how you can serve other people. If you serve other people well throughout your career, all the accolades and raises and promotions are going to come. It's almost impossible for it not to happen. Second, be hungry. You never get to stop learning. When you get to the point where you're done learning and you're ready to put your feet up and coast for the rest of your career, surprise, you just pigeonholed yourself. You're the reason you're stuck. Thirdly, be self-aware, be relentlessly self-aware. Recognize how people might perceive your words and actions and how it might make them feel. Don't ever forget that piece because we sometimes get caught up in ourselves and we play a particular role we think we're supposed to play, whether it's the grumpy old man or the crabby old gal or the punk kid or whatever thing, whatever stereotype you want to tack it onto it. You gotta remember to be aware of how people perceive you. So if you're humble, hungry, and self-aware, you get hired by me a heck of a lot more often than someone who has a brilliant, wonderful resume with 432 years of experience and they invented the internet or invented cable or whatever it is. That's my parting advice to you.
Yeah, I like to say it like this. I can hire a good person and teach them to do the job, but I can't hire a person that's good at the job and teach them to be a good person. So if you're working for us, you're a good person because you wouldn't be with us if you weren't. So just kind of the way I sum it up.
All right, very good. Well, thank you for all your time today, everyone. And best of luck as you go about your work tomorrow. And if you want to further develop yourself, right, realize there's lots of people, lots of resources, right? It starts with you guys and you know, if you do want that, we're here to support you. So